Hi, this is Kasian, and it's time for our weekly conference call at VectorspaceAI. We'll start with what's happening around the world. The Delta variant is resulting in the United States renewing a public health emergency. There have been 30 never-before-seen viruses that have been uncovered in frozen ice. And that connects to some of our work in space biosciences that we'll talk about in just a bit. Blue Origin, the space company from Jeff Bezos, has successfully launched and landed. BTC is trading at 32K and ETH is trading at 2K, and the Dow is in a very tight trading range at 34.7. On the industry side, Cathie Wood of ARK Investments and Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey all discussed Bitcoin this week across popular financial news networks. If anyone hasn't had a chance to take a look at that, now would be a good time. Baidu's Knowledge Enhanced ERNIE 3.0 pre-training framework delivers SOTA NLP results, state-of-the-art NLP results surpassing human performance on the superglue benchmark. And as we know, Baidu is China's #1 search engine. And of course, its initial AI was built by Andrew Ng, who also built Google's Brain AI. CMU team develops machine learning platform that mines nature for new drugs. Researchers from Carnegie Mellon University's Computational Biology Department in the School of Computer Science have developed a new process that could reinvigorate the search for natural product drugs to treat cancers, viral infections, and other ailments. The machine learning algorithms developed by the Metabolics and Metagenomics Lab match the signals of the microbe's metabolites with its genomic signals and identify which likely correspond to a natural product. Knowing that, researchers are better equipped to isolate the natural product to begin developing it for a possible drug. Natural products are still one of the most successful paths for drug discovery, said Bahar Bassaz, a project scientist in the lab and lead author of a paper about the process. And we think we are able to take it further with an algorithm like ours. Our computational model is orders of magnitude faster and more sensitive. So of course that news connects directly to our work in nutrigenomics, datasets related to nutrigenomics. Moving on to themes and events, there are really just two themes and events this week, as we've had the second launch of a spacecraft. So space is a continuing theme, and of course anything related to the Delta variant causing economic havoc in certain districts, locations around the world. On the corp side, everything is steady as she goes in terms of legal and HR, new hiring, and our search for office space in the Berkeley area. Under engineering, product, QA, and ops, we are continuing to work on our summarizer offering, and we'll be demoing that, context-controlled summarization for any documents. This is something that we'll be offering the financial sector initially. And we are engaged in visualization engineering on the space biosciences side. And this involves working with a few visualization engineers and designers to enable our datasets to be visualized in a much better way than they're being visualized today. And as a reminder, what we do in space biosciences applies to the financial markets and vice versa. So the same kind of visualizations that we are working on for space biosciences will be applied to the financial markets when it comes to relationship networks that are able to be interpreted so that trades can be made based on thematic baskets. This also connects to the dataset toolkit, which we've talked about in the past, and upgrading that so that there is just one action that needs to be taken to validate that a data set has a signal. And there are lots of other things we're doing on the engineering side. We won't go over all the details now, but it does have to do with implementing a set of new algorithms. As our Chief Scientific Officer, Raf Podowski, gave a presentation this week that set some more functionality in motion for us in terms of refactoring some of the code and advancing it. In addition to deciding what we want to patent, put in a patent portfolio versus what we want to keep as trade secrets. On the customers, partners, and collaborators side, we've been in talk with a few new partners. Quant Connect was one of them. A long time ago, we talked to Quant Connect when we first got started, but they've reconfigured as a company and are now offering new kinds of data sets. So we've been talking to them about a data set offering. And then moving on to Morningstar, everything is in process there. We are signing new data agreements for tick data, and that's moving right along very nicely. And S&P is moving along as S&P does, at S&P speed, and we'll have updates as they arise. And of course, all others are in process at this point. And we've got our academic collaborators, CERN, also in process. We're actually engaged in something called NER, or Named Entity Recognition. And this would be for papers related to theoretical physics or particle physics. And next we've got our collaboration ongoing with the University College London and Cambridge at this point, as both are connected in areas of research that we're advancing here. We're working with Syra, we're working with Sarah, and we're working with Ellie there. And they oversee AI collaborations at the University College of London. And part of our collaboration is going to be involved with creating graph networks, relationship networks of similar sequences, similar viral sequences, similar sequences related to RNA and DNA. And of course, mapping the virus space, as we know, when we have sequences we've never seen before, just as announced in the news this week, is extremely important in our understanding of where these viruses, their ancestry, where they originated from, and so forth. So we'll be using GenBank, and each virus sequence will be a node, and then we'll have labels that signify the host, and we'll be able to predict some labels while also using hypergraphs. And that is a collaboration based on our algorithm set, a portion of our algorithm set that does sequence matching. It also does spell checking. We're also going to be collaborating with, on the UCL side, the Responsible Research Innovation Group there. And of course, that is to make sure that everything we're doing in space biosciences fits a certain code of responsibility at UCL. And that's not a problem for us. We're also going to be engaged in collaboration with the International Center for Theoretical Physics, and they work very closely with CERN, and that's the ICTP for short. And this has to do with a couple of students there in the material science and in the high energy and theoretical physics area. And of course, discoveries are made by analyzing literature these days and doing it very quickly. We are also going to be discussing export control over information, as we'll be working on space biosciences curriculum and computational biology and bioinformatics related to certain contracts we take on. And then, of course, we'll be collaborating with the University of Aberdeen Law, and that's more on the Cyramian side. We'll talk more about that as updates become available. And then, of course, we've got another collaboration related to systems and networks. This would be with Mark and Brad Karp at UCL for space networks. How information travels between objects in space, or between satellites and ground control, or between lunar bases and other kinds of objects. Collecting this data obviously connects to our work at Azure Space, and we'll be talking with them more about that. We are also going to be working with the Impact Research Group for rockets, and this is at UCL. It's an interesting group that analyzes the environmental impact that rockets are having, rocketry, the space industry is having on Earth, which is going to be an interesting topic or series of topics of conversation as time goes on here. So we are getting involved with them, and we're going to get a good understanding of how we can balance things out here. And we have another collaborator from CERN who started at CERN and then went into biology and is analyzing disease progression. And this is a collaborator with Cybermene, of course, who will be collaborating with us. Some of these folks will be joining our scientific advisory board as well. And then finally, still on the UCL side, we are going to be working with Syra and another collaborator of hers, Chris, on communication theory related to space biosciences and agroecology and farming. And that, of course, relates to biochemical networks that plants and things share, in addition to the extracellular matrix, which is a focus of ours. Okay, we're done with UCL and Cambridge, and we're going to move on to Azure Space. We have been in talks with the senior director there of Azure Space, Stephen, and I have some notes related to how our meeting went with them. We actually met with them today, and we started with an intro to our SAB. Of course, they had a lot of these details in an email that was given to them beforehand, but we did start with an intro to our SAB, and then that included our work with LBNL and the DOE and NASA and UCL at this point. So we introduced UCL as a new collaborator in terms of what we're working on in space biosciences. So Azure Space is well aware of that now, and they liked what we proposed, which meant datasets related to generating graph networks that accelerate the process of scientific discovery, specifically in the area of space biosciences, and more specifically in the area of the brain ECM. This is the extracellular matrix that is surrounding your neurons. This gets attacked by heavy ion particles in space, galactic cosmic rays, and so forth, and being able to understand how to affect repair pathways in that area is our focus. And that's what we were able to describe to the Azure Space Group. And we met with there were three people there that we met with, and we'll talk more about them later. But other people that they want to introduce us to now within the Azure Space Group would be Dave Weinstein, the lead Azure Space engineer and engineer of the Cosmos DB and their graph databases, and then their program manager for the International Space Station, the ISS, related to experiments and data generated. They also offered to host all data that we provide that is of public origin or in public domain. So that was good right off the bat. Then they described that they work with HP and NASA related to placing HP supercomputer on the ISS. And this supercomputer is designed to process gene sequences, simulate the analysis of gene sequences, and simulate mutations within gene sequences. We're going to be learning a lot more about this. Some interesting details, though, is that this computer is called the Spaceborne Computer 2. and they're allowed 2 megabits a second download from the ISS, and HP and Azure Space are allowed 2 hours per day of processing on the ISS. And of course, other notes include Microsoft's genomics group. So when data is generated from this system, it's passed on to the Microsoft genomics group, and they work with the Power BI group to visualize data. So we're going to be, of course, hiring on the Power BI side. We can tell we're going to engage with a lot of visualizations and data sets specifically for Power BI users. And in terms of other things that we were going to focus on that we talked about as outside of the extracellular matrix and brain ECM and microenvironment, exosomes, and DNA repair pathways would be nanomedicine and advanced materials. We had talked about precision and personalized medicine resulting from work in space biosciences. Everyone agreed that there are broad applications outside of space biosciences. And this is what we all intend to educate the public on, are the fact that solutions that come from space biosciences can be applied to all life sciences. We also talked about our new lab setup and office space in Berkeley next to UCB and LBNL, and they were excited about that, and then asked if we would like to design experiments to be run on the ISS and HP supercomputer. We said absolutely. We certainly have experiments in mind that we can design right now. We've got our scientific advisory board with experiments in mind, and some that they've conducted in the past that we can glean from. In terms of the Azure Space goals, their goal is to increase hands-on science in space while generating data sets to be analyzed on the ground. And then they want to issue, and they also understand that creating publicity and awareness, public awareness around everything that's being done within Azure Space and between their partners is critical to their entire operation. So we talked a bit about that. So we'll be, in essence, we'll be talking a lot about what we're going to be doing with Azure Space, and Azure Space will also be talking a lot about what we'll be doing here. Some of it will include dataset security related to ITAR regulations for operating in the space industry. And then our next steps include an introduction to their NLP and AI teams that interface here with Azure Space, and will include other biosciences and genomics groups. So Microsoft, according to my notes, Microsoft is going to include other biosciences and genomics groups next time we talk. So that will be good. They'll be excited about everything that we're doing here. On the corporate, and one more note related to our Azure Space dialogue. There will be times where we won't be able to discuss certain details. We've discussed quite a bit of details right here, and we're going to have to limit the details according to confidentiality agreements once we have everything signed. On the corporate strategy, corporate development, business development, sales and marketing side, we have got a lot of activity happening after August 2nd. We have a few meetings scheduled. We've got Ted Stirali, who's going to visit the East Bay and San Francisco, the entire Bay Area, and line up a few meetings for us related to some of his contacts. And sales and marketing is also arranging for meetings in October and conferences in the Chicago area. And that, of course, connects to the IR and PR and Marcom section. And under that section, we've got our website iteration that we are gearing towards space biosciences. And then, of course, as I touched on it earlier, Azure Space will be preparing to describe what we're working on and our relationship with them. So that's good news. On the exchanges side, everything is in process there. Next, we've got traders' questions from the trader base. Question 1 is a thematic basket for the purpose of generating relationships between plant chemical constituents, and therapeutic use applications a possibility? Well, yes, that is. That's directly related to nutrigenomics. We'd encourage everyone to look up that term, nutrigenomics. It's going to be a large part of space biosciences, and of course, on-the-ground life sciences. This also relates to the headline mentioned earlier from Carnegie Mellon University, related to deriving potential drug compounds by analyzing nature and plant compounds. So we'd encourage everyone to take a look at that article, also posted on our public channels. Question 2, is the above potential use case only available by contracting Vectorspace to engineer? Well, yes, if you'd like it done correctly and with maximum efficacy. Question 3, do you feel that it's possible that a VXV holder can self-design/build the above basket without a background in data science? Instead, an investment in time, research, tenacity to tackle a steep learning curve? The answer to that is absolutely. Just like you can remove the wheels from cars, go back to the horse and buggy, and start using an abacus. Or you can choose to use machines to speed up the process of discovery. Our entire financial operation is based on the premise that you can use a machine to extract hidden connections in seconds, compared to weeks that it takes market researchers sometimes. And of course, that's information arbitrage. Knowing something before someone else in the financial markets gives you an edge. That's how you make money. Question 4, are there still plans to work with Kathy Wood from ARK Invest? Yes, there are. Question 5, do you expect VXV to perform somewhat independent of the wider crypto market conditions? Also not sure if this has been answered, but how much VXV would one need to tinker with the creation of their own thematic basket? It seems that the level of alpha could be generated could yield very solid results if the keywords are chosen wisely at least. Would be painful to part with valuable VXV, though I know you know the value it has, hence the buybacks. Okay, so this is a multi-part question, with the first part being, do you expect VXV to perform somewhat independent of the wider markets? Absolutely. Just as you see stocks and other trading vehicles decouple from the S&P or the Dow or the NASDAQ index. This is how it works. You trade outside of your sector, absolutely. But first, crypto needs to mature to a point to trade outside of BTC and ETH. And that's going to happen as the market matures. You will have crypto sectorized, and with even in those sectors, there will be subsectors, and within subsectors, there will be individual trading vehicles that take on a life and momentum of their own, and of course, ours will be one of them. And the second part of this question would be, but how much VXV would one need to start trading these baskets? We're working that out. We will announce that on the VXV-thematic baskets-tier 1 channel. And question 6, what lessons did you take from your experience in startups and entrepreneurship that would help you drive VectorspaceAI forward? I'm also looking to learn what advice you give to aspiring entrepreneurs to succeed from your experience. Well, I can tell you that what I've learned from other founders and from our own founding team and from running a few teams, that a unified team is more important than timing. That's number 1. Number 2, building something that is extremely hard to duplicate. That is critical. I personally learned my lesson early on, building one of the first HTTP-based stock tickers called Digital Trader, and was wiped out overnight by Yahoo when they bought a similar company that did something very similar. So if it's easy to code, it will be easy to code for others. Number 3, in an extended downturn, lots of private startups get down-rounded, squeezed, and go to dust. Those that don't have public market exposure, as the public sets a valuation, and public market valuations recover while private market valuations do not. So you want public market exposure. If you have a company, you're going to want the public to set a valuation on your company most of the time, instead of a handful of VCs or investors. That's the reality. Having public market exposure enabled Citibank to recover during the 2008 and 2009 downturn. Of course, it didn't help Lehman very much, but the fact is, most companies that had public market exposure recovered their valuations. They may have dropped by 80 to 90%, but they did recover. And that is when you have a trading vehicle that's exposed to the capital markets. And in the case of crypto, it would be exposure to the global capital markets. So we see that it's very important for any company to have a public vehicle exposed to the public markets for the purpose of recovering during any downturns. And 4, a focus on more than one clear path at achieving consequential revenue, followed by profitability. Number 5, importance of facing uncertainty and the unknown. And 6, the importance of putting something on the table first before taking something off the table. And that sometimes means rolling your sleeves up and cutting code, doing whatever it takes to hack away, make it work. 7, understanding the real history of how companies like PayPal, Reddit, Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn actually started. Most people don't know PayPal started by, you might say, persuading people heavily to use PayPal currency on the eBay network. And then Reddit, of course. The founders of Reddit had fake accounts they used to make it seem like Reddit was active. Google went to goto.com and literally stole their advertising technology, AdWords, then paid a fine for that. That's in the history books. We all know the story behind Facebook and, of course, Twitter. One of my early friends was responsible for creating the follow button on Twitter. It's a couple lines of JavaScript code. Sometimes you never know how things are going to work out. With LinkedIn, scouring, and Twitter, by the way, scouring the contact, and Facebook, by the way, scouring the contact list, your address book, enabled them to exponentially increase their user base over MySpace, for instance, and others. So crawling your contact list and getting your friends to invite their friends created a network effect. And that's primarily how Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn took off. So you never know. Nokia started as a lumber company, for example. You never know how things are going to work out, so it's important to adapt. And then for aspiring entrepreneurs, I would recommend the essays of Paul Graham, who is the founder of Y Combinator. Next, we'll move to the strategy section, our last section. And as mentioned, we had a meeting with Raf Podowski, and the engineers took notes. And some of our notes included a focus on bioinformatics and computational biology, and in relation to the tardigrade, which is a small animal, very small. This small bug basically is an extremophile, also called a water bear. Their DNA repair mechanisms and DNA repair pathways are supercharged, and we're trying to understand how and why. Your DNA, it will get damaged in space, and the best way to attack that is to improve your DNA repair pathways without causing cancer, of course. So studying the tardigrade and other animals is something that we're going to be engaged in. And that, of course, relates to biomimicry, which is something we're quite familiar with. And then we will have a focus on virus sequence alignment, or similarity matching of the sequences of virus, as mentioned earlier, creating graph networks related to these because we do have a unique algorithm set that caters just to this, and we've always wanted to apply it to this as well. So our collaboration with UCL and with Azure Space will, of course, help with that. And then finally, there was a headline from Time.com, Time Magazine, and it stated, "Forget the Bezos and Branson space flights. The real deal happens this fall." And if you read that article, that's when SpaceX is attempting to launch non-astronauts into space for entertainment purposes, for the initial start of entertainment purposes. That's all that we have this week. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to join us online. Thank you.